This is my journey. Inspired one story at a time, a library of leaders was created. It began as a journey to learn. As time went on, it began to grow. All it needed was a platform, and this podcast was created to listen, to inspire, to share. I am a storyteller, and this is my journey. Welcome to another episode of Profiles in Leadership. I'm your host, Steve Anderson, and today our guest is David Heacock, whose transformation from a successful Wall Street career to a game-changing entrepreneur is a story of bold decisions, resilience, and relentless determination. Walking away from a seven-figure finance job, David took a leap of faith to rebuild his family's struggling business called Filterbuy. With zero experience in manufacturing, he faced incredible challenges, yet turned what began as a small factory in Alabama into a $250 million industry leader. Today, Filterbuy disrupts the indoor air quality sector, producing millions of high-quality air filters and expanding into HVAC services, air purification, and automotive filtration, while creating nearly 1,000 U.S. jobs and serving over 7 million customers. David's journey has been anything but easy. He's overcome burned down factories, near fatal accidents, and countless setbacks along the way. Yet through his grit and determination, he's scaled his business without investors or shortcuts. His success story is a testament to what can be achieved when an entrepreneur is willing to face adversity head on. So David is now sharing this raw and unfiltered lessons that he's learned from building a business from the ground up, inspiring others to take that same leap into entrepreneurship, no matter how daunting it seems. So David, welcome to the program. It's great to have you on today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So let's give us a little context. We heard in the bio that you were a finance guy on Wall Street, and then you came back to Alabama to kind of save a family business. So just give us a little context, where you grew up, how you got to Wall Street, and why you came back.
Yeah, sure. So I'm from Talladega, Alabama originally, and I grew up, with around the textile industry. My grandfather came back from World War II and started a business servicing the textile industry called Talladega Machinery and Supply Company. And I kind of saw that the rise and somewhat the fall of that in the 90s with NAFTA, where the textile industry basically got decimated in the Southeast. And so the family ultimately pivoted that into a business that was servicing the wood products industry. I grew up in Talladega, small town, and I did what I thought was the rational thing. I said I wanted to get as far away as possible. I ended up
Yeah.
out of college, moving to New York City and working for Goldman Sachs, where I ultimately ran the emerging market options trading business and did that through the financial crisis and saw a lot of learned a lot, and it was a really great experience for me. Um, but in 2012, my family was going through the sale of the family business, which was Talladega Machinery and Supply Company. And I was 29 years old and, really wasn't sure what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. And my grandfather was still alive and really did not want to see the business sold out of the family. And I ended up making the decision to buy it. And so I quit my job, bought from family what was left of the Talladega Machinery and Supply Company, which was largely servicing the very small distribution business servicing the wood products industry. But I like to say that the sales force had an average age of about 60, and it was not, a type of business that was likely to continue. I pretty quickly realized that after buying it, and realized I had to do something if I wanted to be able to sustain this or to be able to survive. And ultimately started looking around for products that we could manufacture competitively in the U.S. and sell direct to consumer. At the time, the direct to consumer movement was very big and popular. You had companies like Harry's and Dollar Shave Club that had kind of popularized it. And so I really thought, well, what product could I manufacture competitively and sell direct? And whittled it down to remanufactured ink cartridges or pleated air filters. Those were the kind of the two markets that I kind of studied closely and ultimately decided to go with pleated air filters because there's so much variation, lots of customization work, and they're very bulky and logistically complex, which is some type of a barrier from overseas competition. And started that in early 2013 and have been growing it ever since. So that's the long
Wow.
story short.
Yeah, that's crazy. So do you think that you came back and did that because you were unhappy on Wall Street, or were you trying to, just save the family business, or that's a big step to go from seven figures and on Wall Street to coming to a company that you just described that looked like it was probably on its last leg.
Yeah, well, some of it was being naive, but you know, the reality is that I was looking at my life 10 years forward. It's like I said, I was in my early 20s, it's before I had children. And I knew that if I wanted to do something entrepreneurial, that it was kind of now or never at the time. And I'd always been entrepreneurial and had lots of different side hustles and going back to when I was a young kid. So I always knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur of some kind. And I was looking at my career trajectory and Goldman was great to me, and the financial crisis, ironically, was very good for me in my career. But I was effectively a bookie for hedge funds. I mean, like if I were going to describe what I was doing, I was basically giving hedge funds the ability to get action when they needed it. I mean, most of my customer base were hedge funds that were making leverage bets, with no real kind of economic purpose at the end of the day. And quite frankly, I was looking at it and thinking, well, in 10 years, like, what does this job look like? And like, does this job even exist in 10 years? Because it just did not seem, completely rational to me, to be honest with you. That I was getting paid so disproportionately well, to be a middleman bookie of some sorts without any real economic interest behind it. And so I had a little bit of a kind of crisis of itself, like what am I doing, what am I going to do with the rest of my life. And the idea of doing something that was physical and tangible that I understood was very potent for me, and it was a big driver of the decision to kind of go out and do something different. I certainly did not understand what I was signing up for. And certainly, like when I, 6 months later, decided to start a manufacturer from scratch, more or less. I really did not know what that entailed. And I think if I did, I would probably not have been able to rationally make the same decision that I did. But ultimately, I was committed to figuring it out in this kind of new in the physical world, and that's ultimately what started my journey.
Okay, so you made the leap and you're in it now, and in the intro, I hinted at, you had some real adversity too. You had a fire at the factory, and then there's also reference to a near fatal accident. So tell us what that was about, if you're okay with that, and how that kind of kept you going.
Yeah, absolutely. So about at the very beginning, like in the very first few months of what is now Filterbuy, I actually did not think we were going to manufacture all of our own product. Like the original business model was we were going to buy the standard size filters and then do the customization work in-house and sell direct to consumer. That was the original idea that
Mm.
that I had. And I pretty quickly realized why logistically it just wouldn't work at any type of scale, and I really needed to own the manufacturing process. Um, and I had never been in a air filter manufacturing plant in my life, but I kind of realized that I needed to figure out how to manufacture these. And in theory, um, it's quite a basic process. There are only five components that go into an air filter: the media, the wire, the glue, the frame, and the box. That's essentially all an air filter is. And you say, well, how hard can that really be? And what I did not understand was just all of the minutia in what I call the institutional knowledge that companies that have done this for a long time have, and oftentimes take for granted. And I basically signed up on a journey for doing that from scratch. And so, um, basically, it took us about 4 years to get to the point where we could manufacture a filter cheaper than we could buy it from someone else. And the only reason why I was able to sustain in that period was because we were a direct to consumer model. So like our price points um, were basically enough that we were able to withstand that barely in that time period. But it took me 4 years of pain to really figure out how to manufacture filters both competitively and at scale. Because that's another thing that I did not fully understand early on is that in order to get your like economies of scale, you really have to be up to a certain level of production, and to build the business to justify that, takes time, and we did not have that in the beginning. And so, like one thing I tell people often is that, especially if you're going to do anything manufacturing, but I really think this is true for any industry that you're going to go in. Um, Having some experience either by working in that industry or by buying a small company in that industry is really a cheat code that, if I could go back in time, I would take, because I was completely, I thought, oh, I'm a smart guy and I kind of, I understand business. Like, how hard can this be? It seems simple relative to things that maybe perhaps I had done earlier in my career, but I was completely underestimating the details that go into it. And so, like, one example I often give with it is, um, the first part of the filter manufacturing process is what they call the lamination process, where you basically are hot, or you're basically gluing a chicken wire onto a media, which ultimately later on in the process is used because it gives the wire gives the media rigidity when airflow is going through an air filter. And not knowing anything about how this works, I got sold by an equipment manufacturer a cold glue laminator. So you imagine like Elmer's glue that you put onto a wire, and then it kind of goes through this drying process and then gets rolled up in a roll on the other end. Well, we were manufacturing in Alabama, and about 2 years in, I remember May hit, and anybody that's lived in the South knows that it gets very humid in May. Like it just like there's a lot of humidity, and the glue was not drying, and so like we had all this wasted raw material that we couldn't do anything with, and it was like we couldn't manufacture, and we were wasting all this stuff. Is hugely problematic, hugely problematic. And I was at my wit's end. Like I really didn't know what to do or how to solve this problem. And I started calling around, and basically by some act of God, I found a person who introduced me to a equipment manufacturer that makes a hot glue version of this laminator, which is apparently actually the standard in the industry, but I had no clue about that. And they actually had a hot glue laminator on the floor, which has never happened again in my career, that an equipment manufacturer actually has one ready, but they just happened to have one on the floor. And I wired them, like the last 55 grand I had, more or less.
Oh,
It took
gosh.
a Penske truck from Alabama up to New Albany, Indiana. Got trained on this hot glue laminator for a day. Brought it back on a Friday night, and then Saturday morning had some people from my team where I trained them how to run the hot glue laminator. And I actually have a scar on my finger where that day I almost cut off my finger making a mistake in training them on that laminator. And like I cut the wire went through my finger down to the bone, and I almost passed out and had to get stitches. But that was really the turning point of the business, because if we had not figured out an answer to that problem, if they had not had that hot glue laminator in stock, I would have given up, because I had tried and failed at this whole manufacturing process, and like we just were at that point wasting more material than we were actually able to use. And it was just completely debilitating, and I was running out of capital and also just energy to fight it. But we had that. I was able to find that machine just by kind of working the phones and figuring this stuff out, and ultimately that was the turning point of the company. And ever since then, like we were really able to kind of figure out the manufacturing and build from there. But I mean, that was 2.5 years into the project.
Wow. Well, I'm just sitting here listening to all this and just thinking how daunting this must be. And then in the bio, I also said that you've done this without any outside investors. So, to me, it'd be one thing if you could raise a bunch of money and, buy a bunch of things and buy people who know what they're doing and investing in the company. But it seems like you just did it all on your own with your own money and your own expertise. Um, Probably wouldn't recommend a business person to do it that way, but you made it work.
Yes, I definitely wouldn't recommend doing it that way. I didn't know any better, and I'm also quite stubborn, so I was determined to figure it out. But it's definitely not the surest path of success. That's why, oftentimes I think people would be better off working in a business or an industry to really understand it before taking the leap and doing something like this. But it also I've also been reminded many times in my career how any business problem ultimately is solvable, and oftentimes throwing money at problems is not the answer. In fact, in times when I've thrown, but later on, when I've thrown money after problems, I've actually found it to create more problems rather than help. And so sometimes being
Yeah.
resource constrained is actually a benefit, not not a problem, not a problem, if that makes any sense.
Yes. Was there a fire at one of your factories too?
Yeah, so it probably would have been a year and a half after that incident we were talking about. It was actually, we sell air filters, and we're Filterbuy is the name of the company. And I started expanding into other types of filters like humidifier filters and vacuum cleaner filters that were largely imported, and we were not manufacturing them. And I spent a lot of money, about $2 million or so, which was at the time huge for us, like investing in inventory to really start that part of our business. And I had moved it into a new 30,000 square foot building that we had rented. And we got everything organized, and we're just kind of getting ready for the busy season for that business. There was a very seasonal business. And about 2 o'clock in the morning in mid-January, I got a call that the building was on fire, and quickly found out that the building had burned completely down. So like all this like this you know investment that I had made, like largest to date at that point, kind of expanding our product lines, basically all of that whole it all burned to the ground, and we were underinsured on it for various reasons, and ultimately got only a fraction of that money back. And so that was a huge blow. Like right after I kind of gotten our manufacturing up to a point where I thought we were stable, and I was like, oh, I'm going to start expanding our product lines and doing other things. And then it basically all burned to the ground.
Gosh.
And um, and ultimately, I used that as a sign to kind of go to triple down on our core business, our core pleated manufacturing business. And I said, I'm not going to get distracted by other things. And it ultimately ended up being a blessing in a lot of ways. But I would have liked to have learned that lesson in a different way.
Yeah, that's crazy story. And what do you think the key is to, disrupting, an outdated industry or something that seems like it's probably been done a certain way for decades and whatever, and you come in and kind of start from scratch. So what is the key to making it different and more successful and being the industry leader?
I think that it's attaching yourself to broader trends is really the key. And like I think about, what made us successful and why we were able to do it is, um, you know, it was the rise of e-commerce, and e-commerce was growing in a major way, and really the rise of Amazon. I mean, like people were changing how they were purchasing and were choosing to purchase online rather than going to a local store. And I knew that if I could attach myself to that, then I would have tailwinds that would allow our business to grow and to grow, gain market share. And so really that was the thesis that we were operating under, is like reverse engineering how to make that business model work for us. And it was attached to a trend where you have tailwinds that so the market is growing at a rapid rate. And also I knew that we were in a commodity that lots of people need. So like the more we're able to grow, the more opportunities we're going to have to expand our sales platform and scope. And so those are the things that made it interesting to me. And I think that that's something that I would encourage people to do, is to attach yourself to whatever broader trends are happening, because it's way easier to gain market share in a growing market than it is in a declining market. And I think that if I had chosen a different if I had chosen a market where it was already stagnant or declining, it would be much harder to find your path in that market. But because we were in a market that was growing rapidly and changing rapidly, and the way just the dynamics for how people are purchasing these types of products were changing so rapidly, that is what created the opportunity for us to go in and find our unique path.
Yeah, yeah. So now you have 1,000 employees, is that right?
Correct.
In your
Correct.
factory, and that's got to be the largest employer in that small little town, isn't it?
Well, that's spread out against 7 locations now. So we're about
Okay.
350 to 400 people, I think, in Talladega, if I'm not mistaken. So I do believe we're the largest private employer. There's the Alabama Institute for the Deaf and Blind is actually in Talladega, and so they're the largest employer, I believe. I believe we're the largest private employer, but we operate in 7 different states in the U.S. So the employee base is spread out across that now.
And how do you find people to work in those positions? Is it easy? Is it hard? Is it ongoing all the time, just trying to find enough people to fill the positions you need?
I mean, it changes over time, right? It has, and it's evolved over time. Obviously, during COVID, it was trickier to hire, but not impossible. I mean, we more than doubled between 2020 and 2022. So, people that say it's impossible to find good workers or whatever, I think are oftentimes using it as an excuse rather than that being the reality. But you know, we have chosen, to operate in smaller towns that have been left behind largely by other employers, to be honest with you. And I think it's been good for those towns, and it's also been good for us because we've been able to pull from a workforce that other people are maybe not pulling from as much. But I would say in today's current environment that hiring is meaningfully easier than it was a couple of years ago. And you could argue as to why, but I think the economy is a bit slower, and it's certainly not growing in the way that it was during COVID.
And are your sites, you said 7 states, are they all located in the South?
No, we're all over the country, because one thing that, if we present as an air filter business, but we're really in the logistics business because we're shipping air at the end of the day. So the air filter manufacturing is like less than 20% of our total product cost, if that makes any sense. Like really, it's the logistics and the getting that product to the end customer that where the real cost is in our business. And so, we have manufacturing plants in Alabama, Utah, and Pennsylvania. So they're kind of strategically located across the U.S. And then we have 4 distribution centers that feed off of those manufacturing plants to get closer to the end user. So we're spread out throughout the country, and we're actually expanding into Canada later this year.
Yeah, interesting. In doing some research for this interview, I did run across something that you had said that you said people overestimate what they can do in the first year, but underestimate what they can do in 10 years. So tell us a little bit about your thoughts on that and your philosophy behind that.
I've come across this so many times in my I'll tell you a little bit of a story that that really hits home for me is when I got into this business, when I first bought the family business and had to go through this kind of transition. I have some old writing where In 2 years in, I said to myself, by the age of 40, I intend to take this business to a $70 million a year business with a certain net income. And I go back and I look at that now, and I was more than double what I had kind of fantasy land put on paper,
Hmm.
8 years before. And I've had multiple experiences like that in my life where like something, it seems so impossible when you're thinking about it now or planning something now. But if you stick with a plan and stay focused, you're shocked at how much leverage you're able to build over that over an extended time period. And I think that especially in today's world, people get so they have such short attention spans, and they create such short-term goals that are oftentimes maybe unrealistic in such a short period, and then then they don't hit them, and then they kind of maybe they change directions completely, or they get frustrated, and they don't understand why they're not getting anywhere. And I think one of the biggest cheat codes left in life, and one of the only arbitrages left in life really, is kind of have is changing your time frame. Like if you say, okay, if I have these big things I want to accomplish, but do it over a 10-year period rather than trying to do it in 2 months, you're going to be shocked at how much easier it is to achieve much larger things. But the key in that is you can't be changing your direction every week or every month and say, "Hey, I want to be the best at air filters today," and then the the best financial trader tomorrow, or the next influencer. Like people change what they're doing so often, and then they wonder why they're not getting anywhere. When if you just like you can be successful at almost anything, but you have to it requires a sustained focus on that one thing. And so people would be much better off zooming out a little bit, looking at a longer time frame, but staying consistent in their actions, and they'll be shocked at how far they're able to go.
Yeah, I think you make a good point there. You bring up it's a little bit old school, but yet I believe in it too, in the sense that, long-term strategy and thinking out long-term, and as you said, being consistent during that time as well is really something that a lot of companies don't do. It's fast and furious, and you got to move, and you got to do this, you got to do that, and sometimes it's just that long-term strategy can make a difference and reach bigger heights, as you said.
Yeah. And that combined with understanding general long-term trends, right? I mean, it's like you want to make sure that you're attaching yourself to growing industries or things that are likely to still be here in 10 years. So it does require that type of thinking. I mean, you can't do it with your head in the sand, but if you combine those two things, then you can accomplish way more than most people think.
And then you look at, entrepreneurship or starting businesses you did and whatever. And of course, there's the resilience we talked about, there's the patience, but it's also a real mind game, right? It's a mental game that, not everybody has. I mean, there you just brought up in the short time you've been talking a few times where most people probably would have thrown in the towel and said, This isn't going to work," but you stuck with it. And I think that's a mindset.
Yeah, it's a mindset. I mean, and I think that, you know, the the we only have context for our own worlds, right? It's like the worst thing that happens to you is always the worst thing that's happened to you. I mean, it's the only context that you ever have. And so, bad things are going to happen, and we can argue about what's worse or not, but you're always going to like anybody's going to have adversity. Like even if the most coddled person, maybe their biggest adversity is they closed the door on their finger, last year, and that's the worst thing that ever happened to them. And then another person has, a way worse experience that they overcome. By like humans are resilient, but we're also, only framed by our experiences. And I think that, we have to realize that anything is overcomable. We just have to commit to, sticking with whatever our broader plan is. And I think that do people a disservice by saying it's going to be way easier than it is, or you're not going to have these problems. The reason I talk about these things are I don't dwell on them at all. They make good stories, or people like to hear them, but it's not something that I think think of at all. I mean, but I've built the muscle that allows me to deal with adversity, to overcome these hard things. And the more that you do it, the more confidence you have in your ability to figure out a way out. And the only way you do that is by putting yourself in situations where you're forced to overcome this, and not be coddled. And I think that it's not what most people are comfortable with doing.
You're the CEO, owner. You're running this big business, and you also have a YouTube channel. So my question is, why do you have a YouTube channel, and what are you doing with that, and how do you find time to put into that?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, for the first 12 years, I had literally zero social media presence, no social accounts whatsoever, and honestly thought I never would. I didn't see much value in it for me, and really just as a time suck. And over the last couple of years, I've kind of gone through a little bit of reframing of just or kind of like not a crisis, but just trying to say, well, like, what do I want to do with the rest of my life? Same thing that happened before I got into my current business. I'm in my early 40s, and I could sell my business and live happily ever after. Is like, is that what I want to do? Or and for me, I very much want to be doing this for the rest of my life. And I want to continue to grow and to expand my skill set and my impact. And I recognize that in order to do that, I can't do it alone. I can't do it in isolation. And the reason why I started the social media is ultimately to go out and show people that there is perhaps a different path than maybe other influencers like to show, but then also hopefully build a community of other like-minded people where I can partner and or invest and buy businesses that make sense, given how I view the world and the types of businesses that I'm in. And so I've launched my holding company is called Filterbuy Ventures, and we both buy and partner with businesses that are in industries that we understand or that we have the ability to bring a lot of value to. And the reason I'm going public on social is hopefully to attract good partners and businesses that will help me to continue to go on this journey. And so that's the whole reasoning behind going public.
So this is a big business. You got a lot going on, as we just heard. I'm sure you can't do this on your own. So tell us a little bit about your executive staff and what does that look like, and who helps you run this organization.
Yeah, so like I spent a lot of time on this the last few years, and it's part of why I can go public and start talking about it now. But I really beefed up what we call our management team, which consists of operating person, a financial person, and a human capital person, more to give you broad strokes, that are responsible for each of those aspects of the business. And we have a very um, you know we have a strategic plan that I've kind of written out and that we're all working under, and their job is to go out and be the operating partners in that to bring it to life. And so they really are responsible for running the day-to-day operations of what we call kind of filter by core. And I spend my time doing business development for 2 to 3 years out and making sure that we're kind of on target for hitting that, as well as looking at acquisitions and partners and whatnot. So that's kind of how we structure it.
And do you do anything for them and yourself to, in leadership training or business acumen so that, they don't have to figure it all like you did from ground zero, but they have a training and learn from others as they go forward?
Yeah, so we all have different approaches, and I have a budget for it. But I work with a performance coach named Dr. Julie Gerner. You can follow her on X. She's a great follow. I've been working with her for about 2.5 years, and she's really helped me, through the process of figuring out kind of what I want to do next, as well as building the management team and whatnot. So that's really been my approach. And I find like with other leaders, it really depends on, you know, what they're like. Everybody's different, and they have certain skills, and or some need to develop a certain type of skills. And so we really tried to target training and whatnot based off of what what the needs of both of the business and of the operating people are on it. But for me personally, as working with a performance coach has been hugely impactful, and I still meet with her every week, and that has been a big part of my kind of moving to the next stage of my journey.
So when you look at this stage of your journey, what would you have done differently with what you know now compared to when you started? What was the first thing that you would do in a different way?
Well, it's a question that's difficult for me to answer, because the reality is that all of my decisions are what led to the knowledge that I have today, and I wouldn't trade them for the world. But the one piece of advice I would give my younger self when I was started is I would have been way better off buying a small air filter manufacturer than trying to start one from scratch. I mean, that is a mistake that I do not believe I would make again. I think that definitely cost me years of progress that I could get back if I could have gone back in time and bought one, or I even just worked in one for a year or two. I would have learned so much that would have saved a lot of hard lessons. So I mean, I think that would have been a cheat code that I wish I could go back and take. But at the same time, I think a big part of why I've been so successful is having to learn the nitty gritty the hard way, and ultimately there's a lot of learnings that come from that you can't buy. And so I don't regret it, but if I could do anything differently, that would be I would start it by buying a small business in this space.
So you started out by saying that basically you came home to Alabama to help out a struggling family business, and being the family business was very important to you. Does this company continue on? Is it a legacy company? Do you have other family members that are going to help you keep it going after you're done, or do you think it runs its course and you sell it?
I have no idea. The I intend to build this the rest of my life. I mean, and I think it will evolve into other things. I mean, I view it as my art. I think entrepreneurship is very much a creative journey, and so for me, it's something I'm committed to doing for the long haul. I also, I'm not really a believer in you know, in fiefdoms, and like I don't really I I don't think it's fair to the business to put children in it just because of who they are. So I'm not really a fan of that. But my oldest is only 10 years old, so I still have a long time to think
Okay.
about how I'm going to deal with that. But if I had to guess, at some point we'll probably go public, and um, you know use that as a natural way to bring in other leadership, or to kind of evolve it. I mean, I think that if you gun to my head, that's the most likely outcome for me. But it's not something that I spend a lot of time worrying about at this point.
So when you get up in the morning, what gets your fire going? What do you look forward to? What do you have passion for? Obviously, you're running a business that's successful, and that has some of its own, but what do you personally really get you going?
Just um, I'm so thankful for um, the life that I have and the journey that I'm on. And for me, it's all about growth. I mean, I think that it's about waking up every day and trying to be a better version of myself in every way, whether that be a better business person and learning through that, or just healthier, or a better spouse or a parent. For me, it's about getting the joy of getting to wake up every day and improve on some aspect of my life in some small way. And that the challenge around that is never ending, and I'm very much fueled by that. I mean, I think the idea that life is basically a constant of chasing endless horizons, and finding. I think that the sooner that you can embrace that and realize that there is no um, you know pot of gold or end game at the end. It's all about the journey and about the growth on that journey. The happier you're going to be, and I'm very fueled by that, and it's just by the growth and the constant improvement in every aspect of my life. And entrepreneurship is a great game to play, in my opinion, because you can do it for the rest of your life.
So you have a 10-year-old, you said. Would you recommend or mentor? Is it a him? Is it a boy?
I have
It's
all
good.
girls, so it's a
All
girl.
girls. Okay. Mentor your girls to follow your path and become an entrepreneur and do that, or do you think it's too crazy and too risky? What does a dad look at it?
It's all about self-awareness. I mean, I have three children, and I can tell you already, every single one of them is different. I have two younger brothers, and we're all very different. And the things that make each of us happy is very different. And most people would be miserable leading my life, and for me, it's full of joy. And I think that that's what's so dangerous about social media and like people have a tendency to envy or to want to copy what others are doing. When oftentimes, if you're copying what makes somebody else happy, it's likely a path to self-destruction because it's not what makes you happy; it's what makes that other person happy. And there's as many ways to live as there are people. And so I ultimately encourage anyone to really chase the things that make that they're curious about, that drives them, that makes them excited to get up every day and focus on those problems, and that's ultimately that's what will lead to more happiness and fulfillment. I think entrepreneurship is a great way to do that, but it's certainly not for everyone. And ultimately, having that self-awareness, I think, is super important. And so, I will do my best to help my children have the self-awareness to find the path that makes the most sense for them.
Yeah, well, that's well put and a great point. So, David, in anticipation of our discussion today, what haven't I asked you, or what haven't we talked about that you want to get into the program here?
Oh, what haven't we talked about? I think you pretty well did the summary of the business highlights, I guess. I mean, the so I can't think of anything major that you missed.
Yeah, okay. Well, you got a very successful business going. You're a girl dad. You got a YouTube channel. Yeah, you're a pretty busy guy, it sounds like.
I'm busy, but I love it. I mean, I only have myself to blame if I am not having fun. So.
Yeah, yeah. That's great. Well, at this point in the interview, David, I always ask my guests the same common question. And that question is, in relation to leadership, what is a pearl of wisdom that you could leave us with today?
In relation to leadership, um, I think that you as the leader are responsible for setting the example for your whole organization. And I think that um, you know, you shouldn't ask anyone that works for you to do something that you wouldn't be willing to do yourself. And I think that gets lost a lot of times in people that want to bark orders or to have some theoretical plan, but they're expecting other people to just magically make it happen for them. And I think that part of what's made me successful is I understand every aspect of our business. I've done every job that we have somebody from factory floor up doing. Like I've done it at some point in the past. I understand it. And I think that that's a superpower of, really having that tangible understanding and not asking somebody to do something that you wouldn't be willing to do yourself. And it ultimately comes to leading by example, and you set the tone and the intensity as a leader. And I think that people that want to start these businesses and they kind of walk away from them and just expect them to run themselves and don't understand why that doesn't work is because it ultimately comes down to leadership, because all the people that are below you are going to mimic and follow your lead. And so I think knowing that is super important.
So, if I were to ask one of your executive staff members or even any of your staff, what would they say that David's style of leadership is?
Um, I would say very hands-on, but also willing to give people a lot of room to take big risk um, and to try new things. Like I have a very high appetite for allowing people to go off and run with ideas, but at the same time, I'm very detail oriented and hands on in every aspect of the business. They can't hide anything major from me without me finding it pretty quickly.
Okay, that's great. Well, David, this has been a pleasure. It sounds like you've had a great, successful life. You've had a lot of challenges as well, but you've seemed to make it work. So it's great sharing your story with us today, and I appreciate your time and wish you the best of luck going forward.
Thank you. Same to you.
Okay, well, take care and have a good rest of your day.
Same to you.
Bye bye. Thank you for listening to another episode of Profiles in Leadership. To listen to all my interviews, subscribe to Profiles in Leadership with Steve Anderson on Apple Podcasts, iTunes, and many other popular podcast platforms. Some of these interviews are on video, and you can search YouTube for Profiles in Leadership with Steve Anderson. You can also access the entire library of interviews on my website, orange.coaching.com, and that is orangetheword.coaching.com, and go to the Media Center and click on Podcasts or Video Gallery. You can also enter the website from pilpodcast.com.